Okay, good morning, everyone. Yesterday was
3 counties, 24 cities, working together, accomplishing more than any of us could alone. Whether your roots run generations deep, or you recently moved to Greater Portland, you are a part of Metro, the nation's only regional government elected by the people. Planning for the future, preserving what we love. Let's keep our region thriving for decades to come.
I'm Mike Reese, and I'm the Dive Safety Officer here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here is diver safety. I'm out here at the Oregon Zoo, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of this building. In the event of fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside the entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order and ask our clerk, Georgia Langer, to call the roll for attendance.
Yes. Councilor Rosenthal?
Present.
Councilor Nolan? Present. Councilor Gonzalez? Good morning. Councilor Gonzalez?
Present.
Councilor Lewis?
Present.
Councilor Simpson?
Present. Good morning.
Council President Peterson is excused today, and Deputy Council President Wong.
Present. Great. Thank you. We'll open up for public communications on non-agenda items. Georgia, could you please describe for the audience our procedures for how we'll do public communications?
If you are testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card from the back of the room and bringing it up to me. If you are testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up by using the raise hand function in the reaction or more menu, or by dialing *9. When it is your turn to testify, I'll call on your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your Zoom window will close briefly before you rejoin as a panelist. You can turn on your camera if you'd like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes, and the timer begins when you begin speaking. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. We do have one person who has signed up to testify in advance, and that is Matt Zmuda. And you can come up and sit whichever one you want.
Welcome.
Deputy Council President, Metro Councilors, my name is Matt Zmuda. I'm the founder of Multnomah, and I'm here today to provide advance notice of our intent to initiate proceedings under Oregon's City-County Act of 1971. Next week, we plan to file a petition with Multnomah County Clerk to begin gathering signatures. If successful, this would trigger the formation of a 13-member charter commission to study city-county consolidation and, if warranted, draft a proposed charter for voters. This notice is a courtesy and not a legal requirement, and we are not seeking your endorsement today. Some brief context. Multnomah County was created in 1854 because the people living in Portland found it difficult to travel to Hillsborough, which was then the seat of Washington County. From the very beginning, this region has been shaped by growth outpacing the structures meant to govern it, and that dynamic continues today. 4 out of 5 county residents now live in Portland. We share the same economy, infrastructure, tax base, and challenges Metro already addresses on a regional basis for transportation and land use. Yet, for basic government services, we maintain 2 separate governments with overlapping responsibilities and duplicate administrative systems. Oregon anticipated that this region might eventually need another option. In 1968, voters approved a constitutional amendment narrowly tailored to counties with a city over 300,000 residents, effectively Portland. The legislature codified this in the City-County Act of 1971. The process it establishes is deliberate and democratic. A successful petition does not force consolidation. Rather, it creates a charter commission with representatives from county and city governments and the state legislature. That commission would have up to 2 years to study the issue, gather extensive public input, and draft a charter that addresses both urban and rural needs. Other cities may choose whether to participate. Unincorporated areas receive explicit protections, and consolidation would occur only if voters approve it by majority vote in both Portland and the county. This effort is not about blame or dissatisfaction with any individual or institution. It's about asking whether a governmental structure designed in the 19th century still it best serves a 21st century region. Other cities, including Nashville, Jacksonville, and Louisville, have chosen consolidation when it made sense for their communities, often to reduce duplication, clarify accountability, and better align services with how people actually live. At its core, this is about giving voters a choice after analysis, public engagement, and a transparent process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any hands raised in the audience, and I don't see anyone coming forward to testify.
Okay, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Today we have 2 items on today's consent agenda. Item 3.1, consideration of the council meeting minutes for December 16th, 2025. And item 3.2, consideration of the meeting minutes for December 18th, 2025. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Second. Okay, the motion is moved by Councilor Gonzalez and seconded by Councilor Nolan. All in favor, say aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the result is unanimous. We'll move on to our presentation for the day, which is on supportive housing services reports from the annual county annual reports for fiscal year 2025, county and Q1 reports for fiscal year 2026. So councilors, we have 2 sets of reporting data for the supportive housing services program today in one combined presentation. As we do every year, we will hear an overview of 3 counties' annual reports for fiscal year 2025. Following that, we will also hear how things went in Q1 of the current fiscal year. So walking us through the data today, we have Yesenia Delgado, the SHS Division Manager, and RJ Stangland, SHS Finance Manager. Please take it away. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Metro Councilors. My name is Yesenia Delgado, and I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the SHS Division Director with the Metro Housing Department. RJ Stangland and I are here today to provide a high-level review of Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas County's annual reports covering the period of July 2023 to June 2024. We will also be providing you all with a high-level fiscal year 26 Q1 update that runs from July 2025 through September 2025. The Supportive Housing Services Work Plan adopted by Metro Council in 2020 includes goals and regional outcome metrics. Each county submits a comprehensive report on October 31st of each year that provides data and updates on how they are advancing key SHS requirements. The report provides key county-level information about performance and financial expenditures for the previous fiscal year. And today's presentation is a truncated version of the county annual reports with an emphasis today on the data submitted around the key SHS requirements and goals, around the 5,000, 10,000 goals, retention rates, information on the population A and B financial data, along with additional financial analysis and data that RJ will cover. Today's presentation is not an analysis of each of the county's performance. The Metro SHS Oversight Committee, which provides independent program oversight on behalf of Metro Council, is currently in the process of developing their annual regional report that really assesses the performance of the counties and the work that was done in the previous year. It also highlights challenges, opportunities, and includes a set of recommendations for you all as Metro Councilors for how we can improve oversight and streamline program implementation. So with the support of staff, the Oversight Committee is currently in the middle of drafting that regional report, and we'll be back to you all at some point in March to be able to present their findings, the report, and the recommendations. And upon your review and approval of that regional report, that then starts the the process for the Oversight Committee to start presenting this report that includes, again, an analysis of the county annual reports to all 3 board commissioners at the different counties. So again, today's really a condensed version of the annual reports focused on the data that you all will be able to review. That will be a really good foundation as the Oversight Committee comes back and shares with you all their analysis of the performance from the county annual reports in the last year. If we go to the next slide. Today's presentation will really include an overview of the regional progress for the county annual reports. We'll have a couple slides on each county's data and what we saw that the reports indicated. We'll have a regional financial overview for what we saw in the county annual reports. We'll round things out with a high-level overview of the Q1 reports and what the goals are for this fiscal year as a region, and then we'll wrap up with questions and discussions. Next slide, please. Slide's blank, but when it comes up, you will see a timeline that really shows the reporting timeline for the 6 months covering October through November. So on one side of the timeline, you'll see October, and this is the 6-month period where really most of the SHS reporting happens. So in October, like I mentioned before, that's when these annual reports come in from the counties for the previous fiscal year. And then that really jumpstarts the process of staff and the Oversight Committee analyzing, synthesizing them to be able to draft this regional report. So that's what's currently happening with the Oversight Committee. And because of the SHS reforms this year, their recommendations are that they will be bringing forth to you all will really be focused on, and if we could go back a few slides to the timeline, thank you. The focus of their recommendations are really taking into consideration the SHS reforms, and given that they will be sunsetted along with the Tri-County Planning Body, they are developing recommendations for your consideration around what the new Regional Policy and Oversight Committee should prioritize and how to better strengthen the work that has happened and build upon that. So just wanted to note for you all that regional report that you will receive will speak to the contextual factors that we have going on right now with implementing the new SHS reforms. And on that wonderful timeline slide that we had, that we will get up there, you'll also see that we are also planning on presenting the regional report to the new Regional Policy and Oversight Committee. So the intent there is to support with continuity of the oversight work that has happened both on the Oversight Committee and now this new committee. So the new committee gets a foundational understanding of the work that has happened, all the progress we've made, but where there continues to be opportunities, and really have that new Policy and Oversight Committee focus on some of those things. So I'll leave the slide up for another second, but this is really highlighting the timeline that we're working under and what you all can expect in the next couple of months in terms of wrapping up the oversight cycle for the previous fiscal year of SHS. And if we go to the next slide, this is really where we start to dive into the data of what we saw for this fiscal year. So the slide provides a high-level overview of the progress made in each of the key programmatic areas that SHS funds. So again, SHS is a local flexible funding source that really funds a continuum of services that supports, different people's needs and priorities for how they would like to access service. But the 4 main interventions that we fund are permanent supportive housing, which is a long-term housing program that supports with both the rent assistance and the wraparound services for households that have higher acuities. Rapid rehousing, which is also a housing program, but is intended for households that maybe don't have a high level of acuity because the program and the wraparound services will one day sunset, and then the household will, be able to maintain in their housing by themselves. We also have homeless preventions, which is more of an upstream strategy to ensure that the households that are currently placed stay in housing, and they might just need a couple months of rent assistance to get that support and then be able to stay in the housing that they already have. And then finally, we have shelter as another key strategy that we fund that provides on any given night shelter to households that need temporary shelter for any given time. So on this slide, you'll see the fiscal year 25 goal, what the progress is made, and as we've shared before, by the end of year 4, we have reached our goal, our regional goal, to stabilize 10,000 households at risk or experiencing homelessness in permanent housing. And as a region, by the end of the year 4 progress, we are well on our way to meet the goal of connecting 5,000 homeless households with permanent housing. So as you can see here, this was the first year that as a region, we've actually have met and then excelled in all of the regional quantitative goals that we set forth. SHS providers in the region excel in all of these program areas, with supportive housing placements being 36% above the goals set forth. Both rapid rehousing and homeless preventions exceeded their goals by 56%. And the number of shelter units that were supported with SHS funds came in at over 24% of what we were envisioning for that goal. And if we go to the next slide, this slide here really provides a portrait of progress in our region's ability to address homelessness. So the data points that you see here are additional progress made by the counties that report on our SHS work plan's regional outcome metrics, or the key performance indicators that we have currently within our Metro SHS work plan. As we have adopted reforms and are looking at updating our goals and KPIs, the reporting structures that we have will shift to be responsive to that. But these are the information, the data points that we're collecting under our current SHS governance system. So the first 3 data points that you see here are households that have received ongoing services so that they remain in housing. So these are households that were placed with SHS. So not only did we place the 2,700 people in households that I shared with you on the previous slide, we have also supported over 10,000 households and remaining stably housed with the SHS funding. So we are really housing people and keeping people housed at a much higher rate than we ever had in our region. And what we continue to see is households entering into homelessness at a much larger rate. And that will be analysis that we'll further dive into with the regional report for you all. But the next 2 data points that you see here are the percentages of households who have retained SHS housing 12 months after getting placements. So for households served with permanent supportive housing, data showed that 92% of those households that were placed with SHS dollars remained in their housing. And for rapid rehousing, that number was 86%. I'll just indicate that both of these retention rates are slightly higher than the average that you see for other funding sources. And what we really hear from providers is because SHS is this more local, flexible funding source, it really allows them to be able to be nimble and serve participants in the way that they need to be served, which I think really speaks to the progress that you see here in this slide. The final data point that you see here are what we call the system-wide returns to homelessness. So these are households that were placed into housing with SHS and for one reason or another returned back to homelessness, whether that was because the intervention wasn't quite right or for other reasons. Well, I will note about this data point is that this returns to homelessness for SHS is slightly lower than what we see for the average for other funding sources. So again, it's indicating that we still have work to do here to improve our systems once people are placed into housing, but SHS is, as a whole, representing higher outcomes than some of these other funding sources that we have in our region. If we go to the next slide, one of the key critical responsibilities of the Oversight Committee is monitoring financial aspects of program administration, which includes reporting on population A and B. Counties are required to report yearly on how the funds are spent by population, and our Metro SHS program work plan indicates that 75% of funds are to go to services for people that are extremely low income, have one or more disabling conditions, and are experiencing or imminent risk of experiencing long-term or frequent episodes of homelessness, otherwise known as population A. And 25% of funds are to go for services that are for people that are experiencing homelessness or have a substantial risk of experiencing homelessness, population B. This 75-25 financial requirement will be assessed over the 10-year period, and counties have to report every year in terms of how progress is going towards this requirement. The supportive housing services of the fundings were designed, implemented, and evaluated by population served and not program type. So having all 3 counties be able to report on the populations that they're serving in the same way is critical for us to be able to conduct regional analysis and be able to communicate out progress towards this key requirement of SHS. In fiscal year 25, this was the first year that the Oversight Committee and Metro staff received population A and B data submitted by all 3 counties using the same reporting tool, which is displayed here on this slide. The population A and B expenditure is reporting by each county, and then we do the work to synthesize it and be able to report on this at a regional level. And as you can see here in this slide, for fiscal year 25, as a region, for population A, we spent 64% of the funding towards that population and 33% for population B. I will note that Metro staff are working with our county partners to have them resubmit previous years of population A and B data now that we all have a reporting tool that works across all 4 jurisdictions so that we can aggregate the first 4 years of population A and B spending to be able to see where we're at in terms of meeting that 10-year requirement. And as we get that data and analysis, we're happy to share that out with you all. In the next few slides, I will pivot over to just some quick highlights on performance by each county. So we'll start with Clackamas County in this next slide. So this is really just a breakdown of the regional slides I just shared with you all. Clackamas County almost met all of their quantitative goals. And there was one where they did come in short, and this was the permanent supportive housing goals, and they did not meet that goal due to a pause that they made in their regional long-term rent assistance due to some mid-year financial forecasting that they did. While this strategy led to the goal not being met this year, this course of action is a proactive measure that will help ensure the future sustainability of SHS programming. I also just want to highlight that Clackamas County also advanced the county's cross-sector work to further align health and behavioral health into SHS program. They had the launch of their healthcare case conferencing pilot, along with the development of a new behavioral health retention team and a medical respite program. This really shows the county's innovation and dedication to support some of our community's most vulnerable members. And this next slide here, again, you'll see the population A and B spending. If we go to the next slide, please, just for county, for Clackamas County. So here you'll see that they, once we combined all of their service areas, and again, we're only including here the main service areas, so there's others that play into the total number. So we just highlighted the 4 key areas, but after we did the analysis for all their program areas, they were at 65% for population A and 35% for population B. In the next slide, I'll walk through Multnomah County's data. And as you can see here, they met the 4 key quantitative goals that we're tracking. There are some additional goals that we're tracking that they didn't meet. For example, the number of supportive housing units that they brought into this year and the number of new shelter units. So even though they did meet their overall shelter goal for how many shelter units they would sustain, they had a goal of how many new units they would bring online that they weren't able to meet. And Multnomah County reported out that that was largely due to funding and construction delays were really the primary causes for this. And they look forward to be able to launch these programs that had some of these construction delays in fiscal year 2026. So we can certainly keep you updated on how that progress is made. They also did some unique program systems infrastructure and capacity building work. They were able to increase their PSH service investments. They typically funded each PSH placement at around $15,000, and they were able to increase that amount to $17,500. And this investment really applied an equity-centered approach by expanding support across communities experiencing homelessness. And they were also able to do some really intentional work this year around regional coordination as it relates to coordinated entry, training, and technical assistance. And if we go to the next slide, Again, here you'll just see their breakdown of population A and B for their particular county, which was 69% for population A and 31% for population B. The last couple of slides that I have here before we dive into the financial analysis is for Washington County. So if we go to the next slide, this here shows the progress that WashCo made towards their goals. And as you can see here, all of their quantitative and qualitative work plan goals that they set in for themselves were met. There is some additional work that they're doing around some of their qualitative goals, but for the most part, all of their quantitative goals were met. Some additional Washington County program highlights included that Washington County has continued to invest in capacity building with culturally specific providers. In addition to providing ongoing technical assistance for some of these organizations, they have launched a culturally specific organization provider cohort, which provides really a holistic approach for how they continue to support these organizations that are doing critical work in their communities. And in this next slide, you'll see the population A and B spending for their county, putting their population A investments at 62% and population B at 38%. So with that, I will pass it over to RJ, who will walk us through a financial overview of the county annual reports, and then we'll wrap up with a brief quarter one update.
Good morning, councilors. RJ Stanglin, Housing Finance Manager. I use he, him pronouns. Next slide, please. I thought it would be interesting to start just with the historical information of SHS from the beginning to where we ended fiscal year 25. So in year one, you can see that on the left is the total gross tax collections, and year one was an outlier. It was the start of the tax. Not a lot of people might not have known to pay it. And then year two so far has been the high point of gross tax collections for SHS. And the trend so far has been leveling with a slight decrease year after year until we get to year four, which is the end of fiscal year 25, where the total gross tax collections were $325 million. On the right is the opposite. You will see the ramp up of SHS programming and capacity building on an exponential level. And that makes sense, especially when there was so much carryover going on in the first few years, that a lot of pressure was trying to get those dollars out to meet the objectives of the SHS programming. I will note that year four, the end of fiscal year 25, was the first year where expenses significantly outpaced the revenue that was collecting. And the fall forecasts of both December 2024 and the fall forecast of 2025 really gave the counties information that they cannot continue this growth. They really need to prioritize the programming that is vital to do this work. Next slide, please. This slide is created from aggregating the annual reports from the counties. On the right, or I'm sorry, on the left is the fiscal year 25 revenue totals, or the distribution of the tax collections to the counties, their expenditures, prior year carryover, and then other revenue sources. And then on the left, if you remember from quarter four presentations, it's the overall spending by category. The things to really point out is that the fiscal year 25 revenue total was just under $300 million in distributions to the counties. There was a little over $360 million in prior year carryover. And then there was $25 million in other revenue, interest earnings, grants, miscellaneous. And I do want to highlight that in Multnomah County, you will see that the light beige other revenue includes that $15 million Metro admin carryover that was distributed that they accounted for in fiscal year 25. I note that because our accounting in Metro didn't account for it until fiscal year 26, which I will show at the end in the fiscal year 26 quarter one, which is appropriate based on their accounting methodology of when it was originally approved by council to when it was dispersed or distributed. You can see also from quarter four that the main categories of spending were permanent supportive housing, safety on and off the streets, system support costs, which does include built infrastructure, and rapid rehousing. And I would like to note that the gray is the expenses of each category, and you can see that they are now dipping into their carryover to meet their programmatic needs. It's about 40% over their fiscal year 25 revenue. So you can see that this cannot keep going, but they do have, in some counties, more reserves to cover it, Multnomah being the one that has less reserves or ending fund balance for fiscal year '26. Next slide, please. Now we'll go into a similar slide that we presented for quarter 4. It shows the spend down plan versus the actuals. As I mentioned last time during the quarter 4, you can really see that Clackamas, after that fall forecast, really stopped doing exponential growth from their original spend down plan. They kept more of a linear and more conservative to ensure that they could have similar programming in future fiscal years. Their main programmatic categories were, again, permanent supportive housing, safety on and off the streets, system support costs, which includes built infrastructure, and eviction prevention. I will note that the budget to actuals for Clackamas, they budget the complete cost of multi-year. So that's why you will see that it's a lower percentage than maybe in other counties where they only budget the year of actual need for construction costs or built infrastructure that may span multiple years. Next slide, please. In Multnomah County, you can see that their actual spending, which is the same as quarter 4, went slightly above their spend down plan. It shows that the need and capacity also warranted that. And you can see that their priorities also were permanent supportive housing, safety on and off the streets, and regional strategy implementation and rapid rehousing. Next slide, please. And now we're on to Washington County that also followed a similar trajectory as Clackamas when they had the fall forecast of 2024, where they stopped doing exponential growth. They really corrected, and it's slightly exponential, but I would say it's more closer to a linear progression so that they can afford having similar programming while also maintaining their built infrastructure plans, which truly did ramp up last fiscal year and will continue to do so in the next couple of years. And with that, I will go to the next slide and we will talk about fiscal year 26, quarter 1.
Thank you, RJ. So yeah, this is usually around the time that we also provide you all a quarter 1 update. So we just wanted to combine both of the data sets so you all could see the continuity between the years. So this quarter 1 update really relates to this fiscal year, and it's for the period July 1st through September 30th. The counties submit those reports on November 15th. So we spend the month of December really reviewing, analyzing those with the Oversight Committee, and we just have some high-level data points that we wanted to share with you. If we go to the next slide. Quarter 1 is the first quarter of the year, so typically contracts are getting started. Sometimes if there's new programming, we tend to see a slower start to the year. But this slide here really indicates, you'll see here in this first row, the fiscal year 26 goal that we have set for a region in terms of for permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, homelessness preventions, and shelter. You'll see here overall a shifting trend in SHS as we head into to the 5th year of SHS, that it's less about new households being served, even though we do have some new of those, but it's shifting also to supporting and sustaining all of the programming and people that we do already have placed into housing at SHS. So here again, you have the goal that we've set forth as a region. The county annual reports for this fiscal year will then really assess where we end in terms of those goals that we set forth. And in the second row here, you see the progress that we've made for the fiscal year 26 and quarter 1 for each of these households. Given previous year's data for where we're at about this time, this looks pretty on track in terms of the performance that we've seen for the first quarter of the year. But the quarter 2 reports are due to us here shortly in mid-February. So we'll be able to provide a more accurate assessment of where things are looking to be mid-year through the year for this fiscal year. You have the quarter 1 reports that we sent over to you. I just wanted to highlight some additional program highlights that you'll be able to find in there, including Washington County launching their Access Center program out in Washington County. This was in conjunction and in partnership with the Just Compassion Resource Center and Project Homelessness Connect, and they opened on July 1st. Multnomah County also further talked about in their quarter 1 report how they were able to leverage and integrate the gap between health and housing case management So they launched a Medicaid-based eviction prevention team and established a data sharing agreement with HealthShare of Oregon. So really speaking to that regional alignment work that we're doing to ensure that we are bringing together different systems that work together to serve the same populations. Clackamas County shared a little bit more about their Tequila Springs permanent supportive housing community, serving 48 and older adults. They are leased up and they have even added additional service providers to ensure that they are supporting with housing stability and service coordination for these adults. So yeah, really great program highlights in the Q1 reports. As you all are reviewing those and you have any questions, please let us know and we're happy to answer those. We'll walk through a couple of financial slides and that will then conclude our presentation.
All right, next slide, please. Okay, so what we're looking here on the right is the tax revenue forecast and what we budgeted for fiscal year 26 versus what was actually collected. If you can see that the fiscal year 26 budget, it is lower, but that was also based on the fall 2024 forecast, which has been updated now to show that there is potentially a higher tax revenue. But I do want to caution putting so much weight on a forecast when this is still the early quarters of tax collection. It's trending well, but there can be a lot of different volatility issues. So it's a great target to go towards, and the Revenue and Analytics Division does an extremely a great job coming to this number. But I would hope that people are a little bit more conservative in terms of what they should be holding for reserves in case that volatility does happen. You will see that the Q1, which is July to September, was only 9.4 million. That's also because the tax season for SHS collection is from August to July. The August disbursement or distribution is the collection of July tax collection, which then is sent to Metro to distribute. There's slight timing differentials between that, so that's why the counties are only reporting that first month of tax collections. If you really take the first 3 months, so August to October, there will be 97 million in tax collections that will be distributed to the counties. I also want to highlight that prior year carryover is critical for this, because of how the revenue comes into the counties. They really do need to carry something to cover the first couple quarters of this as tax revenue ramps up to the big spike that typically happens around April, May. Next slide, please. So I briefly talked about the importance of contingency and reserve. Both Clackamas and Washington have 5% of their program funding in contingency. It totals about 8.2 million. There is some regional investment funding in contingency for all 3 counties, but the majority of the regional investment is in their budget to be spent in those programmatic areas that have been approved by the TCPB. And then lastly, the stabilization reserves. The IGA's originally recommended 10% of program funds should be held in reserves. It was updated after that volatility of the decrease in forecasting to a recommendation of 15%. And you can see that Clackamas and Washington actually exceeded. They have they have 20% in their stabilization reserves right now. And Multnomah has a little bit less because it was critical for them to both use their contingency and a significant portion of their stabilization reserves to stabilize their current programming levels and capacity. Next slide, please. And then last, I just want to end on Metro's administrative costs and the importance of Metro having carryover to cover the costs of the administrative work that's done. You will see that we had a little under $500,000 come in for that first quarter or first month of tax collections. But we also had $19 million go out. And I highlighted that 16 million because 15 million of that is that 15 million that went to Multnomah County, where they accounted for it last fiscal year. It's part of their carryover ending fund balance that is now part of their beginning fund balance. But I also want to highlight that the year-end forecast for Metro is going to have over $35 million in materials and services, and 32 million of that will be the Metro carryover that is going directly to the counties to do ongoing support. That's awesome that you guys have been working and improving that, because the need is definitely there. But it does show that we are no longer in a position where we have all this carryover that we can do this again, unless we have a Powerball winner and they live in Multnomah County or Clackamas County and a significant surprise revenue comes in. We forecast that it'll be a little over $7.5 million in ending fund balance for Metro Administrative after all those distributions go out to the counties. And with that, we will open up to questions.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Besides us running out to buy Powerball tickets? Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate the presentation and want to underscore the work that was done to turn this around with some speed. Having sat in the Oversight Committee as recently as Monday, there were still some thoughts and feelings that were coming out of the committee. But the work that was done here is really good and solid. But I want to channel, I have a mayor who late last night sent an email noticing there was a figure missing from one of the attachments and how confusing, and you know, she's a retired bureaucrat, how confusing it is to have a gazillion attachments. And she's like, why isn't this in one place? And so my answer is, well, we have counties using different definitions with different work plans, with different aims, targets, and measures. This is the whole point of reform. So I just want to use some time today to ask, what is the trajectory of what these reports are gonna look like as we do move towards like a dashboard and the KPIs in this kind of reform process? I know your work plan is ambitious. Is this the last time an annual report contains, you know, over 6 documents, or are we thinking that in the next go-round, the KPIs will simplify how an annual report looks?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Thank you, Councilor Lewis. Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. You know, the first 4 years of SHS, we have built upon 3 different counties' continuum of care, their infrastructure. There's a lot of things that they were doing similarly, and there's a lot of things that we learned as we were starting to like regionalize data that we found out that wasn't happening in data reporting analysis methodologies in a regional way, which has really been the work that we've done at the Metro Housing Department for the first few years to ensure that, you know, we have not apples to oranges across the different counties, but that we have data, reporting, collection, analysis being done in the same way, so that then we can roll up the data in the most intentional and meaningful way. So I do envision that as we work to streamline the goals and KPIs under the SHS reforms, that we will be able to share out more intentional and accessible data that won't be, like you mentioned, a constituent looking at hundreds of pages of a report to be able to get there, right? We'll have a more interactive and dynamic dashboard that will clearly articulate our goals, our KPIs, and progress towards that. Now, around your question around the annual report, as you all approved the legislation ordinance in December, that is a duty that continues to stay with this new Regional Policy and Oversight Committee. So even though the function continues, the way that we've done this in the past doesn't have to stay the same. So even though we will probably still have an 80-page regional report, I think a more succinct and accessible cover letter and transmittal letter, which is what the Oversight Committee has been really advocating for in this last wave of reporting as you've been there, really speaks to how do we communicate this progress? Yes, this work is very technical and nuanced, and we need all this background for how we explain it, but that's not necessarily what's landing and what the broader public wants to learn more about. So we are talking about how do we improve that cover letter, that transmittal letter, that is more the public-facing document. And then with the SHS reform of this new and improved data dashboard, I think both of those things working together will really support in the instances that you just brought up around how a constituent more easily and with more accessibility understands the progress made for SHS.
Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for this presentation. I have several questions, but I'll start with kind of an overview one. This is good data. I appreciate very much the identification of population A and population B expenses. I also want to push a little further so that we can ourselves, but also among the counties, use this data to identify best practices, most efficient ways of achieving our goals. To me, that would be benefited by having per capita information on all the services. For example, your chart, which had for each county, permanent supportive housing, prevent homelessness, 4 or 5 stacks between population A and population B. You probably know, and maybe if I dug into those 6 documents, I could find it, but what's the per capita cost of achieving, transitioning a person who is living in population A into permanent supportive housing compared with someone living in population B? And is there a difference from county to county? And what can we offer the counties by analyzing that information to give them suggestions, pointers, maybe expectations that they adopt the more cost-efficient tactics and programs?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point, because that is indeed what the Metro Housing Department, particularly our data team, that's what they see their role as we're collecting this data. But the first step was to collect the data in the same way across all counties so that we can do some of that regional analysis to be able to show. I don't have that analysis that you're mentioning here, but I do think that it is information that we could probably pull to see how expenses are being captured and quantified across the different service areas and then across the counties. Well, I will indicate that, the analysis does show that even though, for example, there's a lot more households being served in population B, the average expense that is costing is, of course, a lot less than the households for population A. So even though we have a lot less households being served there, the average expense that we're expensing every year is a lot higher. So that's...
I'd anticipate that.
Right.
That's why the council that referred this said, we know that the comorbidity of issues facing people in population A requires a lot more investment to get them to a point where they have reliable, dignified housing than for someone who might have had an unexpected $1,000 expense to fix their car. I think people understand that. I would make a request for you to let me, and if others are interested, know if you have the capacity to do that analysis with the information you have, and if so, what it would look like for these, at least fiscal 25 data.
Yeah, certainly. I think we could follow up with that request. I would want to check with our data team, but
Sure.
I do think it's data that we do currently have available in analysis that we could run and bring that back to a briefing or send you all further information on that.
And are you thinking about other data that you can pull from the reports, data that's already there? You can pull from the reports and do some comparisons county to county, or even some comparisons year to year, that would help inform decisions that are being made, as we have to recognize that with the known information and the known and dependable resources that will come through in the next 5 years, we're going to have to make some adjustments. Whether they're linear or algebraic, those are very steep lines, and it's not sustainable under the current known resources.
Yeah, absolutely. We are thinking about that. I
Good.
mean, we have the data available in the reports that I just shared about, but as you all remember, we also have now data coming in through the data sharing agreement with each of the counties, and that has really opened a much larger pool of data that we can assess. we have the data team already looking at different trends, looking at which interventions are more successful for certain identities and things like that. So we, as we're doing additional analysis and working towards that new and improved data dashboard that we talked about in the SHS reforms, that will be additional information that we'll be able to share with you all.
That's encouraging to hear that you're already delving into it. I'm very interested in it. I think that's how we learn how to make the most of the dollars that the voters have given us.
Absolutely.
I will say, when I first started about a year ago, one of the first things Yesenia asked me to do was try to get the counties to utilize a standardized financial template, and that has happened. So, like, moving forward, I think we're gonna get a lot better financial to do that kind of per capita work. The challenge is trying to get the historical financial data to align with the metrics, which I think is doable, but again, we'll double check capacity and what reporting we can get.
Great, thank you. Encouraging.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. First of all, the report was good. There's a lot of data there. Can't say I've unpacked it all, but it appears to me that we're making a lot of progress and pretty much at the pace that I originally thought. In other words, when we went into this, we didn't really have we had 3 different counties doing different things, and it takes a while to, shall we say, herd cats. So we've come a long way, and it looks like we're getting to some sort of consistency, and I think that's great. I have a couple quick questions. One is one of my own ignorance. Do safe rest villages come under shelters or rapid rehousing? And another question related to that is on and off street safety. What does that entail that is not included in rapid rehousing or permanent housing? In other words, is it just caseworkers working the streets talking to people? I'm a little unclear as to what that includes.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor, for those questions. I can confirm that Safe Rest Villages, given that that's not a permanent housing placement, that would get categorized under our shelter programmatic outcomes, and that's where it's reported under the financial. The way that a rapid rehousing or a PSH placement would work is like when you think of what a traditional housing placements look like, you get a keys, an address to your place. That's what really differs those placements and a Safe Rest Village pod or unit. Around your second question around the safety on and off the street, so that's where shelter is included in that funding investment, but it also includes other things like you mentioned. So the outreach workers that are doing that ongoing support and building connections with people that are living outside. It's also our navigation services, which sometimes is included in outreach, but it's people that are then connecting and getting people document ready to be able to get placed into housing or connect them into shelter. It also includes our access centers. So these buildings and locations that we have for people to access day services, including showers or resource connections. So it really includes a continuum of service for households that are living outside to get connected into services.
So it includes the cost for maintaining shelters, or I was a little unclear in what you said there. You said it includes some of the costs associated with shelters, not the cost of building them or purchasing the properties. I was a little clear. What's the dividing line between on and off streets and the shelter program?
Yeah, so for safety on and off the streets, that category, that only includes the services. So there will be no building costs or ongoing maintenance. That's strictly just services, case managers, the people that are actually delivering the services. We do have a guidance document that further illustrates how capital expenditures for SHS can be spent, and there's pretty clear parameters there. So there is a line that you'll see in our financial report for how counties can leverage these funds for capital expenditures, but they have to follow our guidance that clearly indicates that like, for example, PSH buildings, you can't use SHS capital or SHS funding for that, but there are some nuances where capital expenditures are temporary in nature, then that would be allowable. So that'll be another line in the financial report that you'll see. But again, counties have to follow these and adhere to these guidelines that we've set forth for how they can do that.
Okay. One other follow-up question. Do we have the data to estimate, you recorded the number of the percentage of retention, which looks nice and high. Do we have any way to correlate the number of say, housing units that we've subsidized with the housing bond. And I ask this simply because of the things in the news about, vacancies recently. Do we have any information that can tell us what is the rental, that is the occupancy rate in the units that we have funded through our housing program, through the housing bond?
Yeah, so what I can speak to is the intersection points between SHS and the Affordable Housing Bond. In the county annual reports, we do get data on the households that are being placed into Affordable Housing Bond units that are being supported with SHS and accessing either rent assistance dollars or wraparound services. What I will note is that those units that we're partnering with tend to be between the 0 to 30% AMI. And for the most part, even though I can't give you exact numbers, what I've heard anecdotally from counties and service providers is that those units are being leveraged, have high occupancy rates. And so that's really the connection point between SHS and the Affordable Housing Bond. There's further data that we can further share with you, that talks more about units that are more in the 60% to 80% AMI. And that's really where we're seeing some opportunities to further align how we best resource those units to get placed. But those aren't typically the units that are being braided with SHS funding.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Chair Wong. I had a really similar comment and question to Councilor Rosenthal around the safety on and off the streets. I feel like it's the first time I really see it categorized that way. And it immediately popped up in the pie chart is like one of the really big slices, right, in addition to PSH. So it naturally, I think, draws questions and curiosity. And I think what I gathered from the explanation that you gave to Councilor Rosenthal, it feels like a pretty broad catch-all for services. And as much as I appreciate it, I think like it lends to more questions. So I really want to see the methodology that y'all came up with to come up with that categorization. I think it's such a broad title that people will fill in the gaps with what they think it means, if that makes sense. I mean, when people think about safety with regards to homelessness, they might think of law enforcement, they might think of Portland Street Response, they might think of a case navigator you were talking about. And so maybe it's just this is an exercise of categorization and there'll never be a perfect category system. But I think, I don't want to say concerned, but I just have an attention that I want to draw to that. Especially if it's going to be a standard that we're going to be using going forward. I think another question that I wanted to ask too is I think a broader theme that I'm seeing is the data looks promising. Looks like there's a lot of efficiency and competency that's being matured into the system after a few years. And we're far from singing victory, on a hill. But I think that with our new regional oversight committee and this council, I think is continuing to look at what are the areas of greatest need and political leadership to look at. And when I think of safety on and off the streets, kind of bringing it back to that original point, is I think the intersection of behavioral health with our system that we're building, that's a state responsibility. And the addiction management services as well. I mean, I think that those are the overlaps of people in psychosis experience severe issues with hard drugs and things like that. That when we're engaging with constituents to really be able to communicate that. So I want to keep. I feel like it's a constant theme that I bring up in our reports. That I think that is the next frontier of this work. And when I saw the category, it immediately made me think of, I think that the average person, or if I talk to my neighbor, they're going to be I want to feel safe, and I also want to make sure that the people that we're caring for are safe. So I want to just spend more time with that. I don't know if it's a work session or something that we could dive into specifically with how we want to approach this notion of safety and the category within safety and maybe subcategories within that.
Absolutely. Really great points, and I'll just say it mirrors a lot what the Oversight Committee has also been discussing.
great.
And around that category, and RJ can correct me here if I'm wrong, so we did roll up that category, but in our financial reports, there is further subcategories. So you can see how much is being spent in shelter, how much is being spent in other services around that. Outreach and transitional housing. So those are all pretty big financial sections that we just roll up into that section that we could provide you additional information on. Because I totally understand what you're saying, that it is such a large part of SHS that's being spent there. And even the Oversight Committee has reflected on that, right? Of how that is a shift that has happened in the last couple of years versus the first few years that there was a bigger pie chart around the housing placements and PSH. So there is like a trend happening there, and I think it goes back to as we update these key goals and KPIs, that will what we focus on there will reorient the system towards what they should be prioritizing in program outcomes and spending there. So I do think that as we do additional work around placing those goals and KPIs for the next 5 years, you will see a shift perhaps in how the data is being materialized because of those programmatic shifts, perhaps.
Cool, thanks. Can I ask another question? I think one more thing is just in the fiscal environment that we're in, thankfully SHS revenues look to continue to be stable, and the federal government certainly isn't going to come with any solutions for us and come to strengthen the work that we're doing. And it's hard to see how the state can also continue to be additive given some of the potential challenges in the future. I'm wondering how in our work plans, and this is also like a comment and question for the council as much as it is for staff. I think there are some elements where we need to focus on how do we, bring the revenue that we need, but also there are moments where when do we change legislation or rules that impede us from doing other things that we might need to do, right? And so I think I would love to find the windows of like where is that political leadership needed, where it might be revenue neutral, but it might have some kind of engagement with a scenario. For example, I was talking with Commissioner Shannon Singleton yesterday, and they were talking about how in their homeless services department, but then in their behavioral health department, sometimes they just don't talk with each other, and the porting of cases and referrals is just not working, and that's all administrative policy things that we designate, we design. Just one small example, and it just highlights to me how many more examples of really low-hanging fruit things are out there for us to go out and improve and change. Anyway, that's more of a comment for the council, because it's not just about money. I think the resources are significant, but if there's legislation or authority that we need from the state to go do certain things, we should be looking at that.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis?
Sure, thank you. I'm going to start just reflecting on a couple of things from my fellow councilors. First, Councilor Gonzalez, one of the ways that Clackamas County has built out their system truly differently is to embed homeless services within the same pillar as the rest of their social services. So they're not spending time in the same way shuttling across to behavioral health. It does mean that
It's more integrated.
they're less flexible within their program, and directors are having to check in with other directors. They don't have sole line of authority. But I do think it's an example of someplace where they've gotten it right in program design. So I don't think Multnomah County needs us or the state to do anything different. I think we just need to actually be their cheerleader. Their health department is massive compared to Clackamas County's. I would not in any way say that lessons from Clackamas County will inform Multnomah County. I'm just pointing out it's been done in a way that challenge has been eliminated almost. H3S is a single pillar, a single silo. And then to Councilor Nolan's point, I think as we're looking at the efficacy of our dollars with different interventions, it's really hard to measure dosage in services. but I think we need to attempt to. Because one of the things that we know is these dollars are flexible, and you can support somebody in the way that you think they need to be supported. But a knock on a door once a week or 2 times a month is really different than a knock on the door 2 times a day. And if we can capture some level of that dosage, I think that's really gonna start to say not only what service, but how it's provided. Because we have some counties where if you're getting wraparound services, the maximum amount of money that they budget for the basic person getting those wraparound services is almost the same amount of money as the floor of the amount of money anticipated in a different county. So if you want a county where the max is basically the minimum in another place, we're doing our dosages really differently, and what's working, and for what typologies of people and what living environments. So to make the data teams' lives even more miserable, that would be my challenge to you. But the real question I had is around PSH in Clackamas County. Obviously, you saw the large deviation between the goal and where PSH numbers are in the county, and they've fallen behind. Using the budget math that they use, where they're incorporating multiple years into the budget, I think that's smart. You don't want to put somebody in PSH and then 2 years later have to kick them out of PSH. That's the hardest and the most hurtful cut. That said, I worry we're on the downslope of this measure. Do they have an expectation they will get to that PSH goal by the end? If not, are we asking them to come back and amend their plan? And how much is available units that are welcoming to PSH people, influencing that, and it's not just a pure budgetary issue?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it's a bit nuanced and complicated. Clackamas County, as part of the initial work plan, did have as part of their 5,000 goal to create new PSH units, did have a percentage of that goal that was to that county. And I believe that they have met that goal as a whole. So they have met that goal. What they didn't meet was their annual work plan goal for this year. That's almost in addition to that additional goal, that already 10-year goal that they had set forth. And I think what we're really seeing in Clackamas County now, even though they're maybe the first to get there, is a trend that we're seeing across all 3 counties, which is they have just less dollars to serve newly households because of the amount of thousands of households that they are serving, whether in PSH or rapid rehousing. They are really shifting towards more sustaining those households. And that's what's really taking up a lot of their budget. And we're at a point, and again, Clackamas, just because of the nature of their program, is here maybe sooner than the other 2 counties, but have really reached, when they have run an analysis in terms of the households that they are currently supported, they can't continue to fund new households because of the amount of their budget that's already being spent on sustaining the households that are currently in housing. So they have really, have actually done some unique programming around how can they further support the households that are currently in PSH or rapid rehousing. How can they perhaps expedite their move-on strategies, right? So how do they perhaps do some work to increase a household's independent skills, connect in the workforce, so that through, basically where we're at is through attrition, then they can open up these units to serve more households that are experiencing homelessness today. And that, even though that's where Clackamas County is at, I really think that's where the other 2 counties are headed, because now that we're halfway through this measure, we're just less in that build-up mode and more in that sustaining and finding strategies to be able to move households on from the programming and ensure that they can be housed on their own successfully. It just takes time to be able to do that for households. And for some of the households, due to their disabling conditions or other factors that they might be presenting with, that might just not be an option and will be a household that just needs those services for a longer period of time. So I hope that was helpful. It's just there's just a lot of intricate things going into why they're at that place that they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And do we ask the counties what percentage of folks served might eventually have a move-on strategy, or is that program specific and counties and Metro don't track that?
We're not tracking that at a regional level right now. It could certainly be something that we choose to look into as we're thinking about goals and KPIs. That hasn't been a strategy that we have talked about regionally, But some of the counties are reporting that to us. So like Washington and Clackamas both have these two move-on programs where they are identifying a goal for that, how many households they intend to support in that way. So it certainly can be something that we look to regionalize.
I think knowing that sort of long-term projection sooner than later would be helpful in building out a potential new housing bond. So we're really real about the PSH goals in the 3 counties for
Yeah.
the units.
It's a really great point.
Hell yeah.
Councilor Nolan.
Thanks. Serendipitously, I wanted to talk about the same line that Councilor Lewis just was, and interested in knowing how much information the counties have and how much of that we have about progressions. And both progressions when someone enters the program and starts receiving services, do they move on up? And secondly, how much do we know about the source of the people that are being served in different programs? By which I mean, certainly homelessness prevention is helping people who already have a house, a place to call home. What about the other programs? Are we serving people? How do we decide about investing funds among different categories of services between people who just need $100 for the next 3 months to cover their rent bill, compared with someone who will require tens of thousands of dollars in wraparound services to be able to live independently with some support? And are we moving people from homelessness to some level of housing or shelter? Or are we moving people from housed into, for lack of a better phrase, better housed?
Yeah, I'll attempt to answer that, and then you let me know if I'm missing the question there. What I will note is that we as Metro have set forth these key regional goals and KPIs that orient the counties towards the programming that they should build. But then within that, each county has a local implementation plan and are looking at the needs of their local community, and then are further delineating and having additional decision points around how they prioritize one service or the other. What I have heard from counties, and this is pretty much across the board, but as they are connecting people into their continuum of services, for households that it is an option to, that just need some support and then one day be able to move on into other services, that is kind of part of the case management plan per se that they would do with them. And it kind of throughout their coordinated entry process, which is how a household enters into the system, they do some triaging in terms of like a household that's presenting with these needs. If they get these supports, this is the outcome that we could look towards. That is the level of work that they are doing to then prioritize which program that they go into.
And do we measure whether we get that outcome?
I think I might have to do some follow-up there for you, but.
That's fair. I don't necessarily expect you to be a walking Wikipedia. But it's very interesting if the county has a plan for this household and will invest in this service and that service, and we will expect that within 6 months or 9 months or however long, they will be back on their feet again or self-sufficient. Do we go back and measure whether that plan actually produced the outcome we thought it
I see what
would?
you mean. Yeah, okay. I think I do have an answer for you then. So as households get placed into a specific intervention type, whether that's permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, case managers then, after they are placed and subsidy has ended, they are checking in with households after that. And that's what we call the retention rates that I talked about earlier. And we do have a lot of disaggregated data now on the data sharing agreements that could further, I don't think it'll be as neatly as maybe what I'm trying to explain here, but we do have data that could indicate for households that enter each of these service types, what is their retention rates and how did that outcome?
At 6 months, 1 year, 2 years?
We only have it at right now, I believe, 6 months and 12 months for rapid rehousing. I think for things longer term programs like permanent supportive housing, we can do that a little bit further out. I believe 24 months, but not for the other ones.
I would like to point out my prior career, I was in direct service, and knowing that part of that coordinated entry, when people go in to be assessed, there's a lot of minimization that happens. So sometimes they go in, they get assessed for a program that may not meet their needs until after the case manager starts working with them, and a higher level of care is actually needed to stabilize behavioral health, drug addiction recovery services. So that kind of flexibility is so critical with SHS having that flexibility. That's why you see those successes, but it also makes it a little bit more difficult if you want, they started a rapid rehousing program, but really that's because they forgot to tell their intake worker that, yes, I am an active drug user, or I have behavioral health or mental health issues that come up later.
Thank you for raising the complications with that. And it gets messy because different people categorize what someone says 2 different ways, even if they hear the exact same words. The point I'm trying to get at, though, is if we don't do something to evaluate whether the choices that a intake specialist or a case manager made and the services offered actually get to the place that household needs, we then just go on anecdotes.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty dangerous spot for us to be in. Thanks.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Oh, thank you, Deputy Chair. I thought Councilor Gonzalez was ahead of me. But question, do we have you presented the bulk data, but do we have the information and data available to break it down, for example, by different age cohorts? Particularly, I'm concerned about, how the services are being provided to seniors and the youth cohort, which is a bit hard to quantify in many cases, or maybe we could even talk about disability. Is that data available, or I wasn't expecting to see it today, but in other words,
Yeah.
so we could say how many people have we served for rapid rehousing for, say, under 18, under 18 or under 20,
Yeah, and I think your question and Councilor Nolan's questions from before really start to get at the more evaluative nature of this work. So it's less about the reports and what we have available. But to answer your question directly, yes, we do have that level of data in terms of like the households that are served across different program types. What are their age ranges? What are their positive outcomes looking like? And we have been working with PSU's Homeless Research Action Collaborative, I think is the acronym, on developing an SHS evaluation framework that would further dig into some of these concepts that y'all are raising, which is really not kind of moving away from the reporting structures that we have that really track, hey, these are the regional goals, how are the goals being met, and what's the data around there. But we're really, what I'm hearing your question start to lean into more is the efficiency and how well are these programs then doing the thing that they said that they would do. So that is a role that's unique within the housing department that we're looking to really start to implement within this next year, now that we have multiple years of data under our belt, to not just track the goals and see good, did you meet the goals or not, but really start to evaluate the efficiency of the programs and see for these households that are presenting in this age group with these needs, what are the best program outcomes for them. So that'll be information and reports that we can further share with you all as we start to conduct that work.
Thanks.
Great. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Chair Wong. We're talking about the county's outcomes and, spending. And I know one of the big topics of conversation that has also been at our oversight committees has been contractor practices with many of the providers and getting paid and reimbursed in a fair manner. And I didn't want to miss an opportunity to ask about the progress on that in terms of regionalization of standards and opportunities for providers to talk about their needs. I know Councilor Lewis has been doing a lot of work on that with our oversight committees as well. So just a broader question to whatever you could share, because I mean, we're seeing price tags here of $400 million spent and things like that. And I know a lot of providers have had occasional difficulties getting paid for the work they're doing for the system, and that's not okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really good example of where the oversight work starts to connect with the regionalization work. So the oversight committee and the tri-county planning body. I'm sure Councilor Lewis could speak more to this, but at the last month's in December, the tri-county planning body approved their regional employee recruitment and retention implementation plan. And a pretty large section of that was around provider contracting reform. So there was like this list of items around invoice timely payments, what it would look like to do advance payments, just like all these different reform, not so much reform, but just like contract changes that our region's providers have been advocating, really like prior to SHS even, right? What it would look like to more intentionally do business with them. So that is a plan that has now been adopted by that body. All 4 jurisdictions worked on that and committed to working on those things. So that'll be work that will continue to advance as a region. But even with that, I can just speak to some of the progress that we've heard from each of the counties doing that. And this is where I say this is a good example of regionalization and oversight connecting, and there being some interdependencies here, because our oversight team in this last year monitored the counties in terms of their financial infrastructures that they had set forth in place. And one of the things that they looked into were invoice payments and how that process was looking, and was able to look at in a much more deeper level, because they went out to the counties, looked at their books. What is your process? And they were able to see how there's different processes that each county supports. And we're able to lean into some of those questions and conversations. We, our Metro Housing Department's finance team years ago released a memo in terms of these are things that we would like for you to be doing in terms of how you contract with service providers on the contracting side. So they were able to see how those things were working. And for the most part, there has been progress made since, a few years ago in terms of what providers were saying. And there's still so much work to be done around how we ensure that providers, who are the backbone of the system, are being compensated in the best way possible and in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I do have some of my own questions, but just first a kudos. I think, over the last couple of years, we've really seen improved data, both in results from the counties and how it's presented and collected. So that's exciting to see. Thank you for your hard work. I think to wrap up, I just have 2 kind of big picture questions around how we talk about the data, with the public and our constituents. It's heartening to see that, last year we're exceeding member goals. But my understanding is, the point in time counts, and, folks are experiencing more homelessness, and the inflow is greater than the outflow. And I'm wondering how we want to portray and talk about data in that way, right? I think we're exceeding goals set in terms of metrics, but those results aren't being felt. So I know we have that data, but maybe it's a communications question for the housing department, but how best do we frame that to, our stakeholders and constituents, where it's yes, we're getting a more efficient system over time that's more effective, but we're not addressing the root causes. And, I know there's a lot going on in the world, but how would you take that data piece and the dashboard, but also square that away with what we're actually experiencing out on the ground? That's my first big picture question. And then the other question I hear a lot from constituents that, may not be tracking my new data is, it seems like you're doing a lot of stuff, but things aren't getting better necessarily, right? And then I'm hearing a lot about we'll create shelter, or somewhere along the spectrum, continuum of care, that someone is in this part of a continuum, but they're not moving up towards more stability. And I saw some data on that, but like it would be interesting if we could dive down a little more on the data to see like where the blockage is, because I think that, again, that's one thing that I hear a lot about is like we're investing a lot in this category, but like that's not a long-term fix. So I think those are kind of the two big picture things I hear about. How should we think about that with the data that we got?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that those themes that you're raising are also themes that the oversight committee that you all have charged with conducting oversight for this SHS fund are also wrestling with. And, you know, I won't steal their thunder too much because they want to come to you in about a month to present on that analysis and findings. But you will see in their data and their analysis pretty clearly articulated that for the number of households that we're placing, again, we're placing thousands of people into housing, much more than we ever did as a region prior to SHS. Not only are we placing them, but then as you saw in our retention rates, we are keeping them housed. And yet the number of households that are entering homelessness continue to rise. And you'll see more inflow-outflow analysis in that regional report that we'll present to you all shortly. But I can attest to that number continues to grow despite the number of households that we continue to place. And I think that really, to me, indicates that SHS by itself isn't going to solve the homelessness issue that we have here. And it's really critical that we work together as a region with not just the jurisdictions, but who are our other partners and how do we better align all the services that we have for homelessness in our region. And I think that's where there's really an opportunity with the SHS reforms that you all passed for that regional policy and oversight committee that is expanding membership, that is coordinating discussions and different funding sources and different priorities across our region to how do we come together as a region, have these discussions around how do we better address homelessness in our community and really come together. Because I think what you're seeing in the SHS data to me is pretty clear. We're doing really great work to meet the goals that we set forth 5 years ago, which again, yes, are under a different context, and we're keeping these people housed, and yet more people are entering the system. So we need more upstream solutions. We need more systems alignment and coordination across other systems that are serving the same populations. So our healthcare systems, training and technical support. And even though we've started to do some of that work through the Tri-County Planning Body, I think that's where there's a real opportunity to do more of that. And I think that's why as a staff, it's really excited to think about this next committee and how we shape that up and work with you all to ensure that we're having these critical discussions and then can further implement them to collectively all work together as a region to address homelessness.
And I think that's a good frame to keep in mind more front and center, right? It's like the system is becoming more effective and efficient, but there's so much that's happening in the world, you know, with escalating costs for everybody, higher, you know, it's just like that all compounds. So this is just one part of the solution. And I think it's really important that we communicate that because I think we are getting more value for the investments that we're making. But, you know, we have a lot of way to go, and that's not just on this one measure. So, but that's what people are asking about. So, like, how do we keep you know, beating the drum on that? Thanks. So, Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks. This is more of a request to the powers that be. That might be Marisa, might be President Peterson, this council. I think what would be really helpful is as we're looking at having these reports from the counties and or with the counties, I think that to signal this like new chapter of the SHS measure, I would love to have joint board meetings with the different counties. Like, let's have the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners, let's talk about their data with them in partnership. And I mean, just want to put it out there. I think it would signal the spirit of what we want to achieve these next few years if we're able to do that. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for all your hard work, and let's keep it going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to COO Communications. Marisa, any updates for us?
Am I on? Here, okay. Today, I have a bit of just housekeeping. Metro's code requires an annual report to the Metro Council detailing the status of our region's cities and counties' compliance with the requirements of the Urban Growth Management Functional Plan and the Regional Transportation Functional Plan. All jurisdictions are in compliance with the Regional Transportation Functional Plan at this time. Most jurisdictions are in compliance with the Urban Growth Management Functional Plan, except for a few jurisdictions, Sherwood, Tigard, Clackamas County, and Washington County, that are working to complete planning for areas previously added to the UGB, Urban Growth Boundary. Metro Code also requires a report on any changes made last year to the Title IV Employment and Industrial Areas Map, otherwise known as the Title IV Map. With land added to the UGB and the Sherwood West decision last year, which included Title IV lands, but also changes to the Title IV map for the Montgomery Park neighborhood of Portland. There was a net addition of more than 200 acres of Title IV protected industrial lands in the region in 2025. MPACT, JPACT, and PERC will also receive this annual report, and Metro will share it with the region's 24 cities and 3 counties and post to our website. Happy to answer any questions. Glenn was maybe going to be here if you had questions. Glenn Hamburg. He may be in the ether. Any questions?
We miss you, Glenn.
Miss you, Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn. That's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, well, we'll wrap up with Councilor Communications. Councilor Rosenthal.
Well, I don't have any communications, but I would like to request that an update from the Portland Metropolitan Commission, which met today, which not all of us were able to attend. And I hope Councilor Gonzalez is going to report on a couple significant things from JPAC this morning.
Okay, let's go with Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. First, I wanted to acknowledge that last night was the last meeting of the Tri-County Planning Body. We were able to celebrate some good work, and we met in this room and broke bread / tamales together after our work. And just really want to lift up that there were about 3 pages of notes taken as we went around the room with kind of what people wanted to keep on Metro's mind. I'm not going to read them all to you, but look for that coming from staff. Some of it was Metro's an honest broker, Metro's a good convener. Some of it was reflecting on how the committee worked together. Some of it was also a charge of how we should think about things going forward. 2 of the strongest, most provocative recommendations were one that we consider buying down rents on CDC-owned units, even if they're nowhere connected to Metro. We could be part of the solution. The other was that there's a lot of talk about getting people stably housed in a landlord-tenant relationship. There may be some people who landlord-tenant relationships will always be a challenge. How should we think about programmatic housing of those people without making it sound like we're returning to the days of dark, bad institutions? So just bringing back what was said aloud last night. I also wanted to use this time to get head nods or permission. I'd like to develop some legislation for us to consider at council around making sure that public waters are accessible to members of the public from public lands. I have tapped out my several hours with the Oregon Metro attorney, and in order to get a few more hours of support on scoping this before I could even bring it forward, I think I need to ask for your permission for working on this.
Is this an abstract concept, or is there a particular parcel or parcels you're thinking about?
I could point to good examples in at least 4 different jurisdictions where there has been either a real limitation of public access to the river or to the body of water, or where there's potential future concerns.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Or do you have
Well,
additional?
That doesn't answer my question. I'm hesitant
I'm not
to-
doing this for one parcel. I think I
Okay.
have a couple of case studies I have concerns in Lake Oswego, I have concerns in West Lynn, I have concerns in Milwaukee, I have concerns in the city of Portland, all within my district, and that's where I'm coming from.
And the purpose of the legislation is,
To ensure that the members of the public who would have their access limited have a voice in a public process.
okay. And if I
Question.
might, board or even the Department of Transportation?
We have a functional plan that lays out how folks in jurisdictions work around planning processes. And I would provoke that we have a public interest in how we access our public waterways. And that should be considered in a planning process.
Well, let's look at it, but
And I have a question. Do you anticipate that this would affect the current definitions of the waters of the state, of which virtually?
Absolutely not wanting to change state statute about what is state water.
Okay. Interesting looking at it.
Yeah, I think my question is the scope for it to, does it pertain just to like metro public land and metro water, or is it just like more broadly, like,
Public jurisdictions is defined by the state statute.
okay, so it's like just broadly, and how other, even non-metro entities might, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm happy for you to work with that. To get the support you need.
Carrie, do I need to ask anything else in order to have more time from Roger?
Just sort of take this out of the abstract a little bit. I think council has asked some questions around how do you bring policy proposals forward? And council has adopted rules and procedures recognizing that the appetite on council may be bigger than staffing is for it. So there's a limited amount that councilors can really ask for, whether it's for legal advice in setting up a policy question or even from the departments. And I think Councilor Lewis is really trying to heed that line, if you will, and recognize that some of the questions she's asking to set up for a productive work session, say for council, would require a little bit more staff time. And that's kind of the nature of her airing this interest in this request. We haven't totally formalized those policies, except for in council procedures, you've adopted a rule, and I have to look back at it and say whether it exceeds 2 hours or 4 hours. I can't remember the exact amount of time, but there's sort of a threshold that council has put on itself before taking or requesting additional staff time to evaluate a potential policy proposal.
that doesn't make it much less abstract to me, but I think it actually raises the bigger question of that policy. We are legislators, and for us to be limited to 2 hours access to staff time to explore an idea that we want to bring to our colleagues seems excessively limited. But that's a bigger question. And how many times do we want to have this conversation in front of council? Hey, I've got an idea I'm interested in. I haven't really got enough information to give you to help you get interested in it, but can I get time with the OMA? It puts you in an awkward spot.
Yeah, I have an idea, I have a problem statement, I have folks in the community who are interested in something, but the something isn't there yet, so I can't fully answer many of these questions. What I'm asking for is permission to spend OMA hours beyond the 2 or 4 that have gone into it thus far.
Would you be offended if a colleague or two worked with you?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I would be open to that. I mean, we had open water issues with Blue Lake. So
Yes, Blue Lake is
Blue Lake is the best
I'm
example.
afraid of Blue Lake happening in maybe another lake in my district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to
Or a
support
Oswego
that.
Lake.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. If I understand, the request is for a specific amount of time to develop a legislative concept that we can then debate in council. Is that correct?
Not a specific amount of time, not a capped amount of time, a reasonable amount of time beyond what we get for free.
Well, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but that's the challenge.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get 2 hours or an unlimited number of hours. That's a curious way to manage expertise. And I'm not I'm looking at you only because it's your expertise and your teams. It isn't an issue you can resolve by yourself.
I'm interested in seeing a legislative concept, but I don't want it to be an unlimited amount of time that gets allocated to something like this. But until we understand the goals and the potential range.
I mean, I appreciate Councilor Lewis trying to heed by these
Yeah.
new things that
Yeah.
and there's like this discomfort in figuring it out. Maybe this year we can spend some time in terms of, I mean, we have a council retreat coming up as well with Sarah Wilson, where we can start to look at like maybe formalizing those a little bit, like maybe it's a one pager that's submitted to the council, the problem statement, anticipated time that it's gonna take, and that's the work that our policy advisors can prepare for us so that, I have some ideas, I've been thinking about this, but I do think that the original reason that we wanted to look at a cap, which does feel a little arbitrary, is how does staff react to a counselor's, I don't want to say pet project versus something that is of council priority, and how do you manage those resources, which I do think is a really important question for us to figure out. So, I appreciate the discomfort in figuring this out, but I think we need a more formalized process.
I think there should be a
There should be
process
a
that we set
legislative team supporting our policy initiatives and an administrative or executive. And because we're essentially over, we're coming in over the attorney or the COO and saying, we're going to take some of your staff time. I think we ought to have our own staff time within the council to develop these ideas.
I think there should also be specific milestones in that process. So
Yeah,
it's
that's a
not
good idea.
unlimited time, but like there's some report backs
Right.
to see where we may or may not continue to make agency resources or invest that time.
It's Pandora's box you opened up for us.
Did not mean to open any boxes. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, this is, I think, maybe something we should take up in retreat.
I agree.
Not the policy topic, but how did I launch this conversation? I was coached that this would be a good place to do it. Now I'm like, how should I have done this? But thank you all for the grace.
Well, you used what was available, so that's,
The
That's all we
retreat
can
is a
do.
great idea.
yeah. Okay, seeing,
So did you get the head nods? Did you get the head nods that you need?
It seemed, what I understand from council is an appreciation that it's not unlimited, but there needs to be a reasonableness applied to this, that Councilor Lewis has access to OMA and to other staff as needed to help develop at least something that she can present to council to determine whether or not there's interest in moving forward. So yes, long way of saying,
Great.
I do believe, but
That
I wanted
sounds
to
right.
re-articulate it.
okay. Councilor Lewis, did you have anything else?
I think that was it.
Councilor
I'm
Rosenthal,
done.
did you have anything else? Your hand's still up? Your hand is still up.
Oh, no,
Okay,
that,
great. Well,
just
Just make
got
quick
left up.
JPEG updates from
Okay.
me.
I said what I.
great. Councilor Gonzalez.
Yeah, I just hit the agenda, just make sure I cover everything. Well, we had a JPAC this morning, our first meeting of 2026. I think a lot of y'all saw in the last few weeks, there's been major developments around transportation and the governor's intent to repeal the funding package that was passed in the special session last fall. And because of that, JPAC did spend some time at the top of the meeting with Annalisa from our government affairs team, just to reaffirm the region's legislative priorities, assuming, legislation and policy emerges from Salem in this short session, that the region continues to care about O&M, about transit, and about the major projects in the region. We also had a presentation from the Rose Quarter project. Our friends at ODOT, there's been some major transitions at several projects. So we had an interim project director, Monica Blanchard, and some of her team come and talk about the project, the phasing that they're presenting to the OTC, and trying to provide as much transparency as possible as this project goes forward. We talked about the 2026 JPAC work plan, which is very focused on the region's, influence, force in being able to advocate for the needs that we have here through what feels like, a lot of I don't want to say chaos, but definitely a great deal of change. And then ODOT came to present on their first ever, I would go to say, capital investment plan, 10-year. So essentially their 10-year plan, which feeds into the MTIP. And it's a pretty significant tool for the locals now to be able to inform what ODOT's priorities are when it comes to, the arterials they manage and the programs that they invest in. It's kind of crazy to say that in 2026 is our first chance to really influence that, but I appreciate the bigger project that they've taken on there. So that was our JPAC meeting.
Councilor Gonzalez, when you mentioned the 3 JPAC priorities, operation maintenance, transit, and the large projects, were those ranked in any way?
There's like a whole bunch of paperwork and that's way more sophisticated than what I just shared. That was very much top line. I wouldn't say that we have anything particularly ranked. And I looked at Councilor Simpson, Councilor Lewis, if y'all want to chime in. It was very much a summary, what I was giving.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was not ranked.
It was not ranked. It was not even in any way organized in a prioritized manner.
Yeah. It was very much like, this is our 2025 agenda priorities, thumbs up, does this still apply? We're in a short timeline, we're trying to be nimble and respond to change. And just what was important to the JPAC counselors was we want to make sure that when Metro is in Salem talking about transportation, that JPAC still feels like the 2025 priorities apply to 2026. And that was the affirmation that we wanted. We didn't really dive into the project escalation costs that we're seeing on some of our mega projects. What does it mean for our BRT projects and transit funding, and the challenges there? So we didn't really dive into the nuances of that. Our work plan will reflect transit funding and the cuts and what that means for the region. And we also do want to prioritize really having these major highway projects on a more regular basis at JPAC, but no ranking.
Okay. I just asked because I think there'll be choices that are going to be made where, they might take funding from one of those buckets for another one of those buckets, and they can't all be equal priorities. But I think that's a big discussion for us in the future.
You're right, that is a big discussion.
And if I might, on
Please.
that topic as well, you mentioned specifically the Rose Quarter project, and I think you alluded to the I-5 bridge project.
Yeah, I-5 bridge, yep.
But was there discussion of the dramatic change in estimates?
Mm-hmm.
How do we absorb an extra $7 billion in capital cost?
There was public comment on the project, some response to the public comment, but in our specific agenda, no real, there was no I-5 bridge discussion topic that we had on that. I do think that for this council, for our entire state, we're gonna need to have some really serious conversations about our expectations for that project moving forward and how they bring the cost down. And it feels like untenable right now.
Councilor Rosenthal?
But we didn't have an I-5 bridge agenda item or the project team there with us.
Thanks.
I think there's an addition to that, and I listened to the JPAC this morning. One of the things that there's been a lot of criticism in some cases by some circles about ODOT not doing their estimates correctly, and that addresses the IBR project. They reported in the report, they said they were making efforts, and this is a very positive step, in consolidating and making the kinds of estimates and the timing and levels of estimates consistent throughout the different programs that they do at ODOT. And I think that this is both an admission that some consistency was not there between different kinds of projects, as well as the fact that they're embarking on a process to make this more consistent. And for example, when they do an estimate a long way out, 10 years out, it could be an error bar plus or minus 50%, and then to try and keep narrowing that down. So I think that was an important point that hopefully they will capitalize on and should allay some of the, as I say, criticisms that have gone on in certain circles, even though we don't know if this efficiency or this consistency issue is going to come back up in any new legislation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, ODOT reform, ODOT accountability, I feel like is going to be a big part of legislative funding. And I don't know any of the major proposals that are in the committees. Personally, I haven't read up on them, but I think it'll be something for us to learn from Annalisa, and I'm sure folks on the dais here have probably good lines of sight into some ideas that probably have some momentum. So, yeah, certainly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ugly.
It's not good, for sure.
Interesting times ahead.
Yeah, it's not good, for sure.
Okay, great. Well, we had the most robust Council Communications, I think, ever. So thank you all for that. We have no further business. The council meeting is adjourned. Next meeting, regular meeting, is a council retreat scheduled for January 25th at 9:30. So I'll see you all then.